I just got a Telfar ad before I sat down to make this video, and that's because I've been talking about Telfar nonstop, and there's actually and I'm also waiting for the Lopez voice settlement to prove that if you had Siri activation, your phone was listening to you. And so I guess you could say I'm happy that my phone is going to listen to me talk about Telfar, and you are too. And so I've actually been planning this video since July 8th. It's also an essay on my Substack, go read that. The Saturnverse, SaturnJohnson.com. I just want to talk about Telfar because I started the conversation over on my TikTok on whether or not Telfar is a punk brand. And I know when people think of like punk fashion brands, they're probably thinking of like Vivienne Westwood or frankly some white people, but I think Telfar definitely belongs in the punk fashion space, just like both in the traditional sense and also not in the way that you think. So I'm going to just give you like a brief history of Telfar and point out all the punk points that I noticed and why I feel like the Telfar brand really aligns with the punk ethos in both aesthetically and politically. So Telfar was launched in 2005 and Telfar has remained independent since. So Telfar doesn't have any investors. It's not owned by a major fashion house like or fashion conglomerate like LVMH. They're completely independent, and it has remained that way since 2005. And I think there's a little bit of discrepancy on when the brand was founded, but the first runway collection debuted in 2005, and it was really really difficult researching this because there's just not a lot of like information on Telfar outside of the shopping bag. But the first collection was in collaboration with Vice. The collection was called Vice is Burning. I have a Google Doc with all of the collections, and all of the information about the collections wasn't in one place, so I created a Google Doc with the different like names of this like collections and the season. And so first runway show, which is different than just like exhibiting a collection, was in 2005, but he did collaborate or have like a sponsorship with Vice in 2004. That's called Vice is Burning, and I believe on telfar.net it says established 2004. So collaborations have long been the way of Telfar. It didn't start with UGG or Eastpak. And so as the brands remained independent, collaborations has served as a way to get money to make the collections. And the list of brands that Telfar has collaborated with is actually pretty extensive. In spring summer 2009, their collection Breathe, it's with the E at the end, they collaborated with Ticket Bikes. For spring summer 2011 collection for male, they collaborated with Supima Cotton and Doc Martens. In 2011 they collaborated with American Apparel and Converse. In fall winter 2017 they collaborated with Puma. For spring summer 2019 and fall winter 2019 they collaborated with Budweiser. That's just some of the collaborations that they've done. And so in the early days of Telfar, he was in business school at Pace University and also creating collections and DJing at night to make money. And so there is just like a long history of collaboration with music with the Telfar brand, and I think that's because of Telfar's history as a DJ and him being friends with a lot of DJs. And so the fun fact that I like to share is I first heard him say it in his interview for the cutting room floor, but the Telfar bag is the shopping bag, the traditional one. is priced at like a DJ's nightly pay, or what he made as a DJ, which would be $150 to $300. So that's how he came up with the price for it. But even as the brand continued to grow, he was still DJing to make money to support the brand, because again, he didn't have any investors. I believe it's a 2008 interview. It's 2007 or 2008 interview where he is talking about the collection that he just showed, and he says he was literally off the midnight train just DJing before.
I've been DJing all week this week.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just like fresh off the night train.
I hear you.
And I think having that kind of determination and like faith in oneself is really punk ethos. As he's creating these early collections, I think like the collections aren't the same, but like the interests are very, very clear. As early as spring summer 2006, you have the like cutout tank tops and like mesh clothing, which I feel like is a Telfar signature. You can go buy tank tops. Like the tank top is definitely the signature, but the mesh is as well. You can go buy that on telfar.net right now. That's how much. So it's remained. That is one thing that I noticed that has remained consistent about Telfar since at least 2006. Another fun fact about Telfar is that he writes in cursive. And so when I was taking notes for this video, I wrote all of my notes in cursive, just to really get into the Telfar spirit. Since its inception, basically, the Telfar motto has been, it's not for you, it's for everybody. And the reason why I think that's punk is because punk isn't about exclusivity, necessarily. I know there's like so much discourse on like subcultures and whatnot, but when you compare, you have a motto like, it's not for you, it's for everybody in the fashion industry, which is famously exclusive and famously white, famously skinny, famously, you know, white supremacist, shade, whatever. And then you have a brand saying it's not for you, it's for everybody, looping more people in and, you know, trying to make fashion accessible. I think that that's a very punk thing to do, because it's like leveling the playing field and saying that like I'm not better than anyone else. Earlier this year, for the 20th anniversary collection, in collaboration with some of his friends, I feel bad because I didn't name them, but I will put their names on the screen because they're important too, hosted New Models. And so New Models was a reality TV show and an open casting to find models for the 20th anniversary collection.
Are you completely satisfied with everything in the world right now?
No.
Picture a better world.
The New Models like show is super interesting and you should go watch it if you haven't, but that was a really radical reality TV show to watch. It was very black, very queer. Obviously it's Telfar, and it was called New Models, and they did speak about, you know, like the concept of new models. They said stuff along the lines of like the old model is dried up and boring. Sorry, but like New Models as a concept was, you know, pointing towards more inclusivity, widening, you know, what it means to be fashion, what it means to be fashionable, who gets to wear designer and who gets to model, you know. And the competitions that they did weren't walking between like axes and like walking and like doing like all the dangerous stuff that happened in America's Next Top Model. There were poetry slams and there was gazing, which I'm not super in tune with ballroom culture, but I believe that that's from that. There was also voguing that was part of the competition. There were just so many different aspects. Did I say poetry? There was a poetry slam. Um, and really just seeing who could work it the best. And it was an open casting to like everyone. And I really like the concept of that. And they were saying that, you know, they need a new model, they need something new. And you had people talking about how the old models are fat phobic, they're white supremacists, they're so like institutional, and just, you know, so many of these things that aren't for black people, aren't for black queer people. And so new models presents an opportunity for a new generation of models, and it looked super fun. Another thing about Telfar is that it has been a unisex line since its inception. And I think that's a thing that's glossed over a lot when talking about Telfar, because people focus on the shopping bags. And so the reason that Telfar decided to make this a unisex line is in the Gay Times in 2018, he says, "The clothes I wanted to wear did not exist, especially in the menswear market." And with the cutting room floor, he tells a story about growing up in a strict African household, and, you know, they weren't selling crop tops in the men's section, and, you know, the parents weren't letting him go to like the women's section to buy crop tops. And it was, you know, like this like push and pull with the culture. So that is part of what inspired him to make a unisex line. And another quote that I love from Telfar, I think this is also, maybe he said this in the Gay Times: "Jeans that look hot on whoever wears them." Yeah. And so I feel like unisex, gender bending, non-binary, anybody can wear anything, that also really speaks punk to me. I'm filming this, obviously. Just noticed that like it's not my Telfar shopping bag, but the like dust bag that the bag comes in is in the frame. Shout out to me for framing that bag. I have it like filled with scrap fabric for like making things. When you look at a lot of like punk fashion in the like 80s, late 70s, I'm open to corrections if you find that I'm spreading misinformation. But a lot of the fashion is super non-binary. It's super androgynous, which is probably the term that they would have used back then. You know, men were wearing makeup, women were wearing makeup, you know, sharing clothes, using whatever you had to get your point across. And I think that the Telfar brand in its early stages is a perfect example of using whatever you had to get your point across. So they recently released plastic bags. The plastic bags are obviously shade. I would say it's shade to the people who are like, why would I pay $150 for a faux leather bag? It's a bag that's plastic. And so these new plastic bags that they dropped are both shade to the criticisms about the Telfar brand, as well as a nod to New York culture. I'm not from New York. Very open about that. I've never claimed to be from New York. I have claimed to be from Arkansas though. Anyways, there's a liquor store bag that looks like the bag that you would get from the liquor store. There's a bag, I think it says Telfar, 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 that's supposed to look like the bag that you get from the Chinese spot, you know, the food spot. And, you know, various bags that look like you would get them from a deli or whatever store. And so he released those plastic bags recently. However, this is not his first time playing with plastic. And these plastic bags, they're not actually plastic, they're made out of nylon. But spring summer 2010, that collection called Life Size, it had, I was like noticing like a kind of like shipwrecked theme, and it's like super sustainable or whatever. That's what he said in one of the interviews. He didn't say super sustainable, but you know what I mean, I hope. There was recycled clothing. There was hand-dyed organic cotton. They're like literally dyeing it like inside their apartment, not in any like big factory, but it was done by them. It was done in-house by themselves, whatever the right term is. And there were plastic bags as tank tops that the models wore. So the models wore plastic bags as tank tops. Fast forward 15 years later, there are like baby tees that are inspired and match with the plastic bags that he's selling now. And a cool thing about the Spring Summer 2010 Life Size collection is that the way that it was inclusive was that all of the items were, they had an adjustable waist that fit from 28 inches to 34 inches, which isn't the biggest size range ever, but it definitely is a start. And it reminds me of Issey Miyake. I need to figure out how to pronounce it so I don't embarrass myself in front of the fashion people. A lot of their clothes also fit a broad size range. So I think even making the effort to have your clothing fit more than just model size people is punk, is inclusive. I don't necessarily think that inclusive is synonymous with punk, but I do think that it's a big part of it. So you have already, in terms of just like a punk aesthetic, you have sustainability, you have recycling, you have unisex clothing, you have self-funding, and you have just being an independent brand and not being invested in by the establishment. Oh my god, right? And so maybe you're wondering, how did Telfar manage to do fashion shows outside of collaborations? One of the ways that they afforded to do fashion shows was by hosting benefit club nights. It was the Ghetto Gothic club nights. It was like stylized and spelled in a certain way. I chose not to go down the Ghetto Gothic club nights rabbit hole, but he does still collaborate with some of the DJs that would DJ then. He would DJ also, and I think that's also reminiscent of the rent parties that were hosted during the Harlem Renaissance, where, you know, somebody needed to make their rent. So they hosted a party. There was like a ticket fee to get in, and you know, they sold food, and you know, they helped pay their rent. And the benefit shows, benefit club nights are also punk, because that's just a way to get the community involved in something that like can be a community project. I've been to a few like benefit punk shows where, you know, the money, instead of the money going to the bands, the money is going to help families in Gaza. Speaking of that, if you're watching this video, go to the link in my bio and donate to Ruba and her family. Over the last year, I've helped her raise $10,000 just to like help survive her situation. Donate, and you know, I've gotten to know her a little bit just over through talking to her, and the situation is changing daily. And she wrote me saying that, you know, thank you for helping me raise 10,000. We have like less than 1,000 left, so like I'd appreciate you posting about it more. So if you are able to donate anything, please do so. Speaking of donations, since we're on the topic, the Telfar brand is definitely, they definitely participate in philanthropy. So in 2017, Telfar designed uniforms for White Castle, designed I think 12,000 sets, and White Castle also was his like New York Fashion Week after party spot. And he also put out Telfar X White Castle. No, it's not X. You're not supposed to say the X. You're supposed to just say Telfar White Castle merch, not Telfar X White Castle merch. 100% of the profits from the Telfar White Castle merch collab went to helping bail out miners from Rikers Island. If that's not punk, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. When you're an artist, you have the opportunity to draw from anything to get your inspiration, and Telfar got a lot of his inspiration from working class people. In a behind the scenes interview for his fall winter 2008 collection, he said that the collection was based on working class society and just the people that he would go out and see. He would be inspired by their silhouettes, and in a different interview he mentions that he doesn't make clothes that you wear to fashion shows. He makes clothes for people living their everyday fashion lives, and so his clothes they could definitely be considered streetwear. Some of them are very casual, but they're casual with an edge. So they're also edgy, whatever. The Telfar clothing is just so, I don't own any. That's fine. Because you don't have to own something to participate in conversations about it. And so from the research that I've done, what I've seen is that a lot of the clothing can be worn several ways, especially in the early interviews, the 2008 interviews, the 2007. I just really love those because it's just so raw, it's so real, and Telfar doesn't really like to do press that much. So a lot of the items can be worn upside down, and one of the items, there's a t-shirt that's also a scarf, there's a hat with built-in gloves. He says, in case you lose your gloves in a moment, and in New York you definitely need gloves because it's cold. And then there's like blazers with like hidden pants, and
You have pants and a blazer inside.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like dress pants.
Oh, I see the blazer right there.
there was this like ET hoodie. It's like gray and like it's super cool. It's just super multifunctional, and when clothes are multifunctional, you don't have to buy as much of them. So I think clothes that can be worn in a myriad of ways definitely fit into the punk aesthetic. Shirt as a skirt, skirt as a shirt, you know. There was also Spring Summer 2007. It's a mostly black and white collection, and it feels so rude to like look on my phone while making a YouTube video, but I'm just checking my sources. I don't know the name of this collection. If you know the name of the Spring Summer 2007 Telfar collection, can you please tell me so I can update my Google Doc? Anyways, it just really is upsetting to me that I don't know the name of every single collection. It's fine. Whatever. Anyways, he made joggers that can be worn as a bodysuit. Hello. That's very, very cool. Yeah, that's really all you can say about it, is that multi-use clothing makes it so you buy less clothing. And also in terms of sustainability, I was talking about this with my dad, and like, while nylon and faux leather are not the most and polyester aren't the most sustainable materials, sustainability is really all in how you live, and if you keep something for a long time, that makes it more sustainable. And I'm not an expert on materials, but I know that one of the reasons that people like polyester is because in terms of like issey miyake, pleats please, polyester can hold the shape. even though some people call it plastic. And polyester also stays vibrant for decades. That's why vintage clothes from the 70s is still very vibrant now. But cotton fades very easily. That's why jeans fade like that. And so, in terms of like being a designer, I'm not a designer myself. However, I do sometimes make my own clothes. I was thinking that, there's only like at the end of the day, like when you have a fashion brand and you're like selling things to people, you can only be so sustainable because I do buy things. I did buy something recently. But we also do have all the resources that we need to live, and we really don't need more clothes, more bags, more anything, because we can just like reduce, reuse, recycle, right? That's why it's alliterative. That's why it's a saying. But I think when you're a creative person, when you are a designer, it's not sustainable for you as a person to not make art. And so I think that, sustaining oneself should also come into the conversation about sustainably, because like it's like being an artist and not making art is literally like being constipated. That's what I would say as someone who does consider myself an artist. It does feel like constipation. And nobody wants to be constipated. The final nail in the coffin of Telfar being a punk brand is the fall winter 2019 show Telfar Country. This show had a mosh pit. How old was I during this? This was like 2019. I was like, why was I 16 and depressed in Texas in high school instead of being at the Telfar show? I don't know. Whatever. So Telfar Country, wow, this show, and I think that this like aesthetically, visually, traditionally is really, really punk, just in terms of like how it looks. But highlights from the show are that the models walked a short catwalk and then they crowd surfed down the rest of the runway. And one of the reviews I was reading said that you could barely even see the clothes. So, that's one thing. And when the designer, Telfar Clemens, walked out at the end, he also crowd surfed. Music has been very heavily intertwined with the Telfar brand. One of the bands that performed at Telfar Country, that fashion show, was a hard rock punk band of they're black, they have dreads are punk rock, whatever. And the band is named Horror, but it's stylized HO9909. Yes, that's how it's stylized. And they have an album called The United States of Horror, and various songs, like, and so like their music is very politically charged, very politically active, and because Telfar is an independent brand, they get the opportunity to post the video saying that Chris Smalls was detained by the IDF and was the only person that faced physical abuse because he was a black person. They get to broadcast a TikTok video of that from the walls of their flagship store, because they are not bound by the politics of the industry, because Telfar says he's in collaboration with the world, and the people who buy the bags are the consumers. Also note, the Telfar shopping bag is inspired by a paper bag, like a paper shopping bag that you would get. That's why it's called the shopping bag, and it's supposed to replace that. And so when I would go out, I would just use my Telfar bag. I have the medium sized one, and just like stuff things in it. not steal, but sometimes people use it for that too. Hey, you do what you gotta do. Because Maya Angelou says the ethics of a community are dependent on the needs of that community. But it's a shopping bag inspired by a shopping bag, and I think that's very meta. That's very cool. But that didn't come out till he had already been in the fashion industry for 10 years. And so on the topic of the NYC flagship store, I think the store is super cool. They broadcast TELFAR TV from there, which is a public access network. You and I could submit to TELFAR TV today and be featured on it if we wanted to, because they do crowdsource a lot of their content, and I really like that because that shows a value for the customers. There's also a couple lines that he released that have like the Telfar logo and then they say customer. Cool, meta. I hope that you enjoyed my ramble about Telfar. I have more to say. I have more to say. So if you want to hear more about like various like Telfar collections, because I did do a lot of research, comment down below and I'll make another video. Until next time.